All right, thank you members of the public for your patience, and just want to welcome you back. This is kind of the beginning of the school year for the London Police Services Board. So I'll call the meeting to order. And I first want to welcome officially Deputy Chief Stu Betts at his first London Police Service Board. He's at his first board meeting. He's been obviously here for some time already, working and being involved, and I think he was wearing high heels this past weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So,
what's wrong with that?
No, nothing wrong. It's great. Thanks for supporting. So the Law Enforcement Torch Run Ontario presents, sorry, one sec, hold on. All right, sorry, I just was looking for something else. So the Law Enforcement Torch Run Ontario presents London Police Superintendent Bill Merrilies with a 50th anniversary Special Olympics Ontario momentum in recognition of $350,000 raised in 14 years at the London Police Charity Golf Classic. So on behalf of the police board, well done to Superintendent Merrilies. So that's great work. So I'll look to the board for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll get right into the meeting. So we have one added item from Vanessa Smith regarding her term expiry on November 28, 2019. Look for a motion to add that to the agenda. Moved by Susan, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? Carries. Look for a motion to approve the minutes of the June 20th meeting. Moved by the mayor, seconded by Javid. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carries. Human Resources Report, Deputy Chief Betts.
Chair, through you, this, as the report indicates here, over the course of the summer, we hired 9 cadet recruits. We also hired 2 full-time civilian positions, 2 temporary civilian positions, and as you've pointed out, 1 deputy chief. However, during that time, we also had some retirements. 1 police constable retired, and 1 police constable resigned and pursues another career right now. We had 2 civilian members who recently retired as well. So I just recommend to the board that they accept this report for their information.
Thank you, and thanks for your first official report. Look for a mover. Moved by Jeff, seconded by Susan. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. So the Crime Stoppers and Pursuits Statistics Quarterly Reports. Deputy McIntyre.
Thank you. No, just, it's obviously been posted, just subject to any questions anyone has. I'm more than happy to answer them.
Look to the board. Any discussion? Look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Susan, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? And carries. Thank you. Collection, Preservation, and Control of Evidence and Property Mandatory Report. Deputy Betts.
Chair, with your permission, I'd like to suggest that we move item number 7 and number 9 together and consider them closely related as one feeds into the other. Therefore, I'll start with number 7, the collection, preservation, control of property and evidence. This particular report outlines the process that the London Police Service adheres to for the disposal of property that's found or seized, comes into the possession of the police service. The Police Services Act has reporting requirements to the board regarding that disposition of property. Specifically, Section 132 of the Police Services Act speaks to the disposal of property other than firearms and currency. And during the reporting period, I'd just like to point out that we came into possession of nearly 18,000 new pieces of property seized and or found. However, we were able to dispose of just over 18,349 pieces. Typically, property is returned to its rightful owner. However, when ownership cannot be determined or the owner does not claim the property, it's disposed of often at public auction, which will be item number 9 on the agenda that I wish to bring forward. A record of that disposal is required in the manner in which it's disposed of. Section 133 of the Police Services Act speaks to disposition of seized currency, and as you'll note in the report, nearly $35,000 or close to $36,000 in Canadian currency and $358 US currency was turned over to the board during the reporting period. And in Section 134 of the Police Services Act, we have to report on the disposition of found or seized firearms. So during that 1-year period, we recovered or seized 463 firearms. 92% of those firearms that were seized were in the course of police investigations, and 53 were returned to their lawful owner. And we disposed of 388 of those firearms. They were destroyed under police supervision. So I'd like to recommend that the board receive this report for its information, and then I can move on to number 9.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Susan, any further discussion? Mayor?
Thanks very much, Chair, through you to the Deputy Chief. Two things. There's always some sense that I've got two parts to this question with respect to acquisition and ultimately disposition of assets that have been determined. One is the issue around cash. And it's always been thought, not always, there are those who think that our police department receives that cash to do with as it will. There are some that believe that the cash goes to another level of government. Some say that there should be some split. But can you, without doing cost sharing, I'm wondering if you might just help us just clarify what happens with issues around cash that's been seized that is not returned?
Chair, through you to His Worship, the cash that's seized that isn't returned or we can't find the rightful owner of is actually in turn turned over to the Police Services Board, and it's up to the board at that point to dispose of that cash how they see fit. I understand that many charitable organizations benefit as a result of the money that is brought into the board, but that's upon deputation to the board. The police service does not benefit from cash that we recover. We don't get to keep that cash. I will extend that to also say that any tickets that are issued by the police do not come back to the police. We just simply, we don't retain that. We have no interest in and no benefit.
I wanted that said for clarity, and I'm glad you made that point. As it relates to firearms, I can tell you though, any in terms of disposition, they do not go to the Police Services Board. So you've indicated that the majority get destroyed. Certainly those that have where there's not a legitimate owner. Based on the types of firearms that you're recovering, is there any trend, or are there any particular concerns, knowing that you're relatively new to this position in London, but is the police department finding any types of firearms that are particularly alarming relative to our fight against crime?
I think the firearms that always present the greatest concern for us that are those that are easily carried and concealed. And so that typically falls into the hands of handguns versus long guns. Typically those are the sorts of firearms that present to us the greatest concern. And that's a trend that we've seen, and as we've seen in the media across this country, is the prevalence of firearms in the community. And it's not we're not going after the lawful firearm owner of a long gun, if that's the case, or a target shooter. These are the illegal guns that should not be on our streets. That's concerning.
So based on that, through you, Chair, one final question relating to the firearms. What percentage of the firearms are deemed illegal, non-registered, where they might be imported or brought in from wherever, relative to the total amount that are collected?
Through you, Chair, to His Worship, you have raised an interest and a topic of considerable interest in that there currently is no accurate recording of the number of firearms that have come into the country illegally. We certainly participate in tracing programs, and when we believe that we have firearms that are come into our possession from that is a crime gun, we will initiate a trace through that process. It's not a quick process, and oftentimes inconclusive as to the origin. But I know that that it is an area of immediate concern and interest to the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and will be a topic of significant research as we move forward here.
Board Administrator, Jennifer?
Hi, I just want to give some clarity to the Mayor's first question. When you asked about where the cash goes, Deputy Chief Betts said that it goes back to the board. It actually just reduces our annual budget. The board has a small budget within the greater London Police Service budget, so that's where that money goes.
Thank you. So, sorry, did you want? Okay. So so we're dealing at 7, 8, and 9 all at the same time? 7 and 9. 7 and 9, sorry, my apologies. So look for a motion. Moved by Susan, seconded by the Mayor. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. And back to you, Deputy.
Sorry, just through you, Chair. The last motion was for agenda item number 7, correct? And then this agenda item is number 9, which is regard to the auction, the disposal property for the auction. Okay, thank you. So this report is submitted for your information purpose only. It complements the previous report. It discusses the disposition of property, as I said, that has come into the possession of the London Police Service. This particular grouping of property was auctioned off by Mackenzie Associated Auctioneers on April 8th. The police service is required to publicize forthcoming auctions. This particular auction is a means of disposing of found, seized property, bicycles, and jewelry. Gross proceeds from this particular auction were $15,178. The auctioneer is paid a 15% of that proceeds for the services rendered, resulting in a net proceeds of $11,771.30, which, as I had mentioned previously, was turned over to the board, and as I've been advised as well, is used to reduce the board's budgets.
Thank you. Looking for any questions? Look for a motion to receive. Moved by Javid, seconded by Susan. All those in favor? And it carries. Thank you. Now we'll go over to quarterly reports, complaints against police. Deputy McIntyre.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is really to show, and the chief has a responsibility, of course, under their legislation, to provide the board with really a trend of what is happening as it relates to police misconduct and disciplinary proceedings in that regard. So when this posted document is really, again, a 5-year trend showing you that that progression, it's to alert the board. The whole purpose is to alert the board on anything that really is a deviation from that, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions you may have.
Just look into the board, see if there's any questions. So I'll look for a motion to move. Moved by Susan, seconded by the mayor. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carries. All right, so just getting something on number 11. So we'll come right back. Sorry, one sec. Hold on. All right, so number 11 is an item that we dealt with during the summer. It's the Western Information Sharing Memorandum of Agreement. The MOU was initially discussed June 2019 and completed August 2019. It's being shared today as an informational item. The goal is always to be as transparent as public and put the information so the public is aware of this MOU. I will say the board did have an opportunity to thoroughly discuss this matter. It wasn't a unanimous vote. I was the one member against this, but I'll turn over to Vice Chair to provide further comment.
Thanks, Chair. Through you. The first thing that I wanted to mention is in my personal opinion, this should have been immediately discussed in public session when it was first placed before us, and I do want to apologize that that wasn't done. The idea was that there were some changes that we wanted to make, and those changes were made, and now they're before you. Hindsight's obviously 2020. If I could do it over again, it would have been discussed in public session immediately. It's a learning process, so we'll do better, or at least I will commit to doing better if possible. So what I wanted to mention is that the idea of these Roughdale parties is a difficult one for police. Obviously, there's lots of security issues, safety issues, and this memorandum of understanding was a way of trying to balance what are some of the tools available to police to address some of these concerns. What I can tell you is that, like the chair said, we did have discussions and numerous changes were requested by the board to try to tighten the document and minimize those intrusions into privacy. So for example, we put in tighter restrictions on the length of time that the university would be able to have these documents in their possession before they had to be destroyed. The other thing is this is a pilot. So this is a 1-year document. We're committed to doing this for 1 year, and we are open to feedback. So I know that there are concerns about due process from the university side. We would welcome people providing any feedback, especially if they feel that this information was misused in any way. There are provisions in the contract for us to cease to be a party to the contract with some notice. And again, at the end of the year, one of the things that I think the board will be committed to is reviewing, did this work, was this effective, and is the efficacy worth it when balancing against those privacy concerns that students and members of the public might have. And the last point I would just make is that while I am talking about privacy and trying to protect privacy, this document only pertains to members of the public who were actually charged with a serious offense. So it's not the case that if you're just there, or if your car is there, your driver's license or the plates from your car are going to be recorded and shared, and just attendance is going to be shared. That's not the case. The only information that's being shared is information that's ultimately in the public realm, which is offenses, and the kind of information that being shared is limited to, for example, name, what's the nature of the offense, and what is the process in the court. But again, this is a tricky one. I understand that it's might be controversial, and it is that pilot project. We're open to reviewing it, and again, would welcome any input or concerns and see if any of those can be addressed going forward.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And just for clarity for members of the public who are following, the board sometimes regularly deals with memorandums of understanding. Sometimes they're time sensitive and they come up different times. Everything was done consistent within the Police Service Act, and there was no issues on that front. I do want to turn over to the Chief just to provide a little background on the matter from an administration perspective.
Thank you. So this is essentially another tool in the toolbox, which will hopefully help us more effectively address what's transpired with some of the unsanctioned parties over the last few years. As most of you are aware, we've tried a number of different measures, and we've simply run out of tools. So this is something else, but as Vice Chair Toth indicated, it's there are significant parameters built into the MOU, so it's for serious offenses only. And what that means is defined within the document. And it just allows for some sharing of information between the London Police Service and the university, so that they may enforce their code of conduct. It's not something I anticipate will be a common occurrence, but as I said, it's another tool. And it's only a pilot, so after a certain period of time, we'll step back and we'll evaluate the effectiveness, and the board and Western administration will make a decision whether to carry on or not.
Thank you, Chief. I just look to the board members for any other comments or questions. Javit?
I just wanted to say, as a board member, as a physician, as a citizen of London, I'm very concerned about the weekend. I appreciate all the efforts that have gone into mitigating challenges, but we see across in the health, policing, social service sectors, the significant human consequences of the events that transpire in this event. And I encourage young people in our community who are thoughtful and responsible citizens to continue to be thoughtful and responsible and truly consider whether participation in such unsafe events is part of the standard that they want to live by. There's too many lives at stake, too much at stake for us to get this wrong. So I just felt compelled to share that.
Thank you, Javit. Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much. I'd like to echo Javit's comments. Let me also add, I think there's been unprecedented cooperation amongst a number of parties to mitigate the impact of this Roughdale situation. So I'd like to commend our police for their actions. I think it's been proactive and positive. I'd like to acknowledge our municipal officials who have participated at some length on about this issue. We need to acknowledge other first responders. We know that fire department and EMS have been involved with the discussions. And particularly, let me point out, and I say this also wearing another hat as a member of Western's board of governors, that Western and the University Students' Council have really stepped up to provide a number of options like alternative programming and being very supportive. So we want London students to have fun, but we want all Londoners to be safe, and that's the spirit behind this. So commendation to the police department and all those who have been party to this.
Any other comments from the board? So I just want to just make some comments briefly, but I think it'll probably be better if I hand over the chair to the vice chair so I can speak.
Go ahead, Chair.
Thank you, just following protocol. So I was the one member going to support this. I can understand the intent of making sure we have a safer community and doing what we can. I know it's very real challenges that members of the London Police Service, Emergency Service, the city is facing. It's a daunting task to try to grapple, and I think this was another tool in the box of trying to address that concern. For me, I just didn't support it based on just the information sharing, the privacy concerns. And I know there was a lot of conversations back and forth to tighten that up. But for me, still, fundamentally, I just didn't support that. And that's why I objected to the vote and just wanted to make the public aware. So I wanted to give you some context for my reason. So I look for a motion to receive that. So moved by the mayor, seconded by Javid. And I should have given that back to the vice chair, but I already jumped the queue. So all those in favor? And it carries. Thank you. So we have a delegation from our good friend. I think we call her the bicycle mayor or the bike mayor. So watch out, Ed. Someone's coming for you. And it's a delegation. Citizen Shelley Carr is here today to present to the board and administration related to Project 529. So welcome.
Thank you for having me here today. Never thought I'd be here at this beginning of June, but here I am. So I'm here talking, oh, 1 second, how do I make it go up on their screen? Oh, there it is, never mind, you've read my mind. So I'm here to talk about bike theft in London, Ontario, and where we are and some solutions to the problem. So I am Shelley Carr. I am indeed the London, Ontario Bicycle Mayor and the Bikes Program. It's based in Amsterdam. I am also a student at Kinlan School of Business, Fanshawe College. I'm supposed to be doing a math test right now. I don't think I'm gonna make it. I'm also the owner of the Facebook London, Ontario Stolen Bike Report. I'm a bicycle advocate, and I've had my bike stolen, and I've recovered it myself. So the problem is that we have increasing bicycle theft in the city. And it's not just affecting people who are recreational ride. It's also people that are using their bikes as a form of transportation. The expensive cars and the ineffectiveness of transport options, plus fitness and disabilities, means that a lot of people use bikes more than they used to. So when a bike goes missing, it's a big hole in someone's life. So how does bike theft affect our community? First off, it's climate change and it's our health. 25% of all victims ride less after a theft, and 7% of all victims never ride again. Your carbon footprint using a car is higher than using a bicycle, and there's a lot of studies that are starting to show that depression and loneliness are linked to non-active transportation. How bike theft affects our community and crime. 2 million plus bikes are stolen annually in North America. It's a $1 billion cost to our North American communities annually. 1/4 of stolen bikes are used to commit secondary crimes, and 20% of all victims buy a cheaper or a stolen bike as a replacement. So you're creating a perpetual cycle there. And most importantly to me anyways, less cyclists on the streets means fewer eyes watching for crimes in the community. If people aren't walking and biking in their community, then they're gonna catch people in people's backyards. But if they are, they're gonna catch it. So here's the background information for London, Ontario. In 2018, 780 bicycles were reported stolen to London Police Services. It's important to recognize that a lot of people don't report. In 2014, 200 unclaimed bicycles were sold at the police auction. By 2019, 254 unclaimed bicycles were sold at the police auction, and that's not including the upcoming election. I believe we have 200 more bikes that are at the next auction. They don't include scavenged bikes left at racks, and they also don't include the fact that many bicycles are stolen in organized thefts with larger city destinations such as Toronto. So I run the London, Ontario Facebook Stolen Bike Report, and it is much like having two angry pigs in a blanket fighting all the time. They're really angry, and as you can see by the comments here, I'm not going to read them out, but I think the thing is that the most important thing to bring out of it is, first, they don't understand what police actually do, and I'm really glad that you brought up how the money is used, because that's the #1 argument. They don't do anything for us because we have bicycles, because they're keeping that money for themselves. So thank you for that information that's going on the Facebook page tonight. It's also, but bigger problem than that is priority. There's a lot of inconsistency between what happens when a rider reports a bicycle to one set of officers to another. Well, you call in an officer and they're like, oh, well, you know, report it online, we'll see what we can do. Or some really knock themselves out. And if you show them, hey, my bike's on Kijiji right now, can you go get it? And they'll go get it and they'll bring your bike back, right? So there's a big inconsistency there with what kind of service you get depending on what officer you talk to that day. And the last one, which really concerns me, is that people talk about confronting thieves themselves. They're convinced that they can just go and confront them, and I really worry that someone's going to get hurt or even more killed, right? And that's happened over a cell phone. So then we have some really good things that happen. People have some people have really great experiences and they know where their bike is and the police go get it and it's great. But then you have the other side where people just don't get any feedback. And because people don't get feedback, they quite often won't even bother to report, which then makes it easier for thieves because if no one's reporting a bike, well then we can just keep doing it, right? So here's my solution to the problem, and I've spoken to a number of officers about this, and the number one thing they said is to adopt a registry system that all community members can identify as specific to London, Ontario, promote it heavily in media, and do community outreach with mass registrations. And the one that I recommend, because it's so well known in Canada, is Project 529. It's Canadian-based. They already have a known effectiveness in BC. They have a 30% reduction in thefts in Vancouver. Registrations have already been set up with city staffers and London Bike Registry Service. It's low cost compared to administrating your own system, and it works in conjunction with other police services identifying theft rings and theft patterns. Who has adopted Project 529? So there's 1,400 law enforcement groups, schools, and other organizations that have adopted it. But what's important to us is what's happening in Canada, in particular what's happening in London, or in Ontario. So St. Thomas, our sister city, has adopted Project 529. That means that if a citizen in London registers their bike with Project 529 here and ends up in St. Thomas, they're more likely to get it in St. Thomas than they are if it was lost in London. That's sad. And what's really important is that Peterborough, Ottawa, and Guelph have all adopted this program. And most importantly, because I believe a lot of the high-end bikes go to Toronto, CycleTO has adopted this program. So it just makes more sense out of all the other organizations. Like I speak to Project 529, I've spoken to them. They don't pay me to tell you that it's the best. I'm just telling you that it makes the most sense. So what are the benefits for London Police Services to adopt a central registration system? First, you have consistency, right? It's inexpensive, it's easy for you to use, it's easy for us, the cyclists, to use. All we need to do is register our number from our bike, put in our information, and boom, we're registered. And sometimes you get a fancy sticker, sometimes you don't. It doesn't really matter because your name and your information's in the system. It really creates a lot of goodwill towards police services when cyclists recognize that the reported crime is important. And that's the number one thing that I get from the angry people on my page is they're angry, their bike's stolen, and then they're angry again because some officers say, well, your crime is unimportant to me. So through registration days, you can create a positive community outreach where people start to see the police as someone that they can go to if something goes wrong. Because right now what people are saying is, well, there's no point in reporting because they're not going to do it anyways, right? And in addition, Urban League London is considering supporting the program by having community associations do registration days of their own. In conclusion, bike theft is a problem in London, Ontario. I probably have 10 people a day sign up on London, Ontario Facebook page thinking that I can miraculously find their bike. Honestly, London Police Services could use the PR boost, especially over cycling, because there's a lot of bad faith right now between the police and the cyclists, not just over bike theft, but also because of a ticketing campaign that just occurred in the last week. And bicycle theft is costing our community in so many different ways. And I listed them: climate change and community, creating community and isolation and loneliness. And I just see that adoption of Project 529 would enable LPS to reduce all of the above issues, and it would make you look good too. So I don't have too much more to add. I've submitted a page that was information given to me from Project 529 about the details of how the program works. I believe some officers already have experience with it. I can't think of anything else to say, but thank you. And do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. And now go to the board for questions. Vice Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Shelley, I want to thank you for your excellent presentation. I'm really glad you're here. I think you're right that there's lots of room for improvement in terms of how we deal with issues around cycling and trying to promote cycling and encourage cycling in this community. My question isn't actually for you. I think you were very comprehensive. And I apologize, I'm going to put one of the chiefs on the spot and just maybe get some information for the board in terms of the viability of doing this. Sounds like the cost is low, and it's probably not something that can happen tomorrow, but is this something we can explore? How can the board support you in exploring adopting this kind of a registry? Anyone?
Chair, through you, I'll take that one since I reported on the auction of bicycles. I'm not familiar with 529. I am familiar with other registry programs administered by police services. So the 529 program does, from what you've presented, does seem to be a good option if it's well known within the bike community, and who better to inform what's going to work than the people who are in the community most affected. I could suggest, if, as the Vice Chair asked for suggestions, that if there are costs associated to engaging with 529, perhaps some of the proceeds that we make from the auction related to the sale of police bicycles, or of seized bicycles or found bicycles, might help to offset any costs associated to that. And it's something that we can explore as to the viability of connecting to this particular program, especially since, as you pointed out, some of our close neighbors have done so successfully. So we can have a look at that and then report back if that's acceptable.
Vice Chair, you still have the floor.
I'll save the motion for now in case there's other comments, but from what Deputy Chief Betts is saying, I would move towards exploring some sort of registration system, whether it's Project 529. I like your comment, Deputy Chief, that it makes sense to use the one that the experts in our community are suggesting. And perhaps, if possible, I'm not sure what timelines you need, but to report back in the October meeting about that viability, the costs, and then whether or not we can siphon something from the auction. I think that's great. I would move that motion.
Sorry, Mayor?
I'd second it and just talk to it. It's nice to have another mayor at the table here. I commend you for your energy in this project, but for bringing this project forward to all of us as well. I think that's helpful. I think you'll certainly find the police, notwithstanding all the resource commitments that we make, that to the extent that we can make this practical and usable and I'll say easy to administer, and if we can financially support it. So I'll echo the Vice Chair's comments that if there's additional information you can share, that would be helpful. And then we'll talk, but we're getting into our cooler weather, so there'll be a few less bikes out. So I think as it comes to the point of implementation, it would be likely when the spring thaw, and I apologize for bringing that up at all, but when that happens from a real practical perspective. But thank you for your participation. I thought it was clear, concise, and energetic. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'll look to the board for any other questions, comments. Seeing none, I'll just comment. Thank you again for coming, Shelley. It's very helpful and very much appreciated. You always provide a wealth of knowledge, and thanks. I know you're representing countless other bikers and bicycle cyclists in the community, so I want to thank them also for reaching out to you and sharing their feedback with you. And I'm glad administration was so responsive and was able to kind of work with the board right away immediately. So that's really great. Just I don't want to set the bar that high every time. That's just not how reality works, because there's a lot of things that happen in the community with the resources that are limited. But the motion's been moved by Susan and seconded by the mayor, and I'll go back to Susan.
Maybe I should ask Deputy Chief Betts, is the October board meeting a reasonable amount of time to even at least provide an update? No, I'm seeing like, that might be November? I'll let.
I will invest the time, either during work hours or after, to try and come up with a way to deal with this. As you said, it's a problem in the City of London. I'm a new resident in the City of London. I bring 3 bicycles with myself and my family, and I will invest the time, and I will have something to update the board with. I can't promise it'll be a full implementation at that point, but at least I will research and get some information to update the board with for the October board meeting.
So the motion remains the same. That's been moved and seconded. So seeing no further discussion, call the question. All those in favor? Great, and that passes. Again, thank you very much, Shelley, and thanks for coming today. So we have a new item added, which was a discussion related to Vanessa's reappointment, or her November 28, 2019. So I'll turn over to Vice Chair.
Thanks, Chair. As you may or may not know, one of our members, Vanessa Antman-Smith, her term comes to an end in November. She was appointed just for a 2-year period. If you've ever served on a board, and particularly a board of a large organization, you know that the learning curve is extremely high. Vanessa comes to us, I'd like to think in part because the board advocated for and requested the voice of an Indigenous member of the community. Her voice is invaluable. I think we need to ask that her term be extended. I think it'd be really unfortunate to lose somebody after we've had significant changes, not just to the board, but to the executive. So if only for the purposes of some consistency, but beyond that, to continue to have her voice, I think is extremely important. Losing it would be a significant loss. So I would move that we write a letter to the ministry seeking that her term be extended.
So it's already been seconded by the mayor. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. Not only do I second it, but we've talked about, and Susan, you articulated the notion of ensuring that we hear Indigenous voices around the table. I also have experienced in my short time on the Police Services Board through Vanessa an incredibly articulate, thoughtful, caring community voices around the table as well. And that's something I aspire to. So I absolutely endorse this, and would look forward to having this message taken forward to those who make such decisions and appointments at the provincial level.
Thank you very much. So not seeing any other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And it carries? Great, thank you. So before we conclude the meeting, I did want to turn over to the chief. Sorry, one second. So before I turn over to the chief, I want to go over to Deputy McIntyre.
All of this bike talk has me motivated to explain something and to redeem myself against Deputy. But so just in relation to your comments in your presentation, Shelley, was awesome. I wanted just to kind of give a high level education recently on the project that just ran. It was a traffic blitz project, which we took extensive criticism for. But just know that I heard you there. Like, we heard what you said, and I think this is where communication, the piece, was maybe missing. So I just wanted an opportunity to be able to explain that. London Police partnered with the city for Vision Zero. It was truly a global movement, which was designed to eliminate traffic deaths and injuries caused by vehicular collisions. So we know that in the City of London, what's your why? What was the intention behind the project? It kind of goes back to stats. I'm not a real big stat person, but I'll just give you some numbers as basic high-level education. Over the last 5 years, 371 pedestrian collisions and 193 cyclist collisions have been recorded at or near signalized intersections in the City of London. So since 2016, 15 pedestrians and 4 cyclists have died as a result of a collision. And so that's not good. So City of London and the London Police partnered on this initiative entitled Vision Zero. And the whole initiative was designed at safety and education. Obviously in the media, it was perceived as kind of being targeted at cyclists, but I just wanted to give you some numbers as a result of that project. As in relation to actual tickets that were issued, 14 pedestrians were issued a ticket, 9 cyclists were issued a ticket, 97 motorists were issued a ticket. Several warnings were given. This is the education piece. 99 drivers were issued warnings about various offenses. 8 pedestrians were issued warnings. Another 17 cyclists were issued a written warning. At the end of the day, it was about education. It was about being safe. It was about leading and partnering an initiative with the City of London to be better, right? So one of my sayings is always, when you know better, like, teach that out. And so how did we do that? It was through this initiative. The cyclist community, we heard you. And our intention wasn't directed at you, although definitely in the media, it kind of took its own initiative there, and there was a focus that was our intention. It was not, so please hear me when I say that. We run blitzes on a traffic initiative oftentimes, and some of those are like heavy trucks, or they're maybe in school safety zones, and you'll see the City of London recently supporting initiatives to do a different speed safety approach in community safety zones. At the end of the day, it's about safety, but we welcome your feedback, and I'm so honored really that you spoke up, those especially in the cyclist community, because your feedback helps us do better the next time as well. So I just wanted to provide that, especially in light of Shelley's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy, and thank you, administration. It's very amazing to have an administration that's always willing to be responsive to the community and addressing concerns that are raised to the public. I know there was many questions asked relating to cyclists in the initiative, so it's great to see that they spoke about the operational impact. So before I turn over to Chief, I know recently there's been very many questions raised in the public and through the media, and in particular some important questions about the board's role. And I just want to assure the public that we are always committed and willing to discuss and continue to work with the board and consulting with administration and legal counsel to clarify what our role is, what our responsibilities are, and what we should know, and whether we need to review and update our policies and do anything differently in the future. And I know there's been some initial conversations with the chief and administration, and we're committed to always continue to do better, and we're gonna continue to have some more conversations, but I'll turn over to the chief, and his statement will probably make more sense of what I'm trying to get at.
So, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to shine some light on another item that's been in the media recently. Earlier this week, there were reports in the media in relation to a citizen who in 2016, while in our custody, was assaulted in our detention unit. I understand that there are concerns about that incident, and there are also questions about the process by which it was handled. First, let me say that the treatment of this individual, this citizen who we had in our custody, was deplorable. And to say it fell short of standards would be an understatement. When we became aware of this incident in 2017, a criminal investigation was launched immediately, which resulted in an officer being charged and ultimately convicted of assault. An internal investigation followed, which resulted in a Police Services Act hearing before an external hearings officer. These proceedings have been reported on, and it is not my intent to revisit today what has already been reported publicly. I am unable to comment on any action that was or was not taken relative to any other members of the London Police Service involved in this matter, as these are internal human resource matters. While Chief Perry and I were satisfied with the investigative process having regard to all of the circumstances, we can always do better. Events such as this provide an opportunity to reflect and identify areas of improvement and growth. I, along with Deputy Chief McIntyre and Deputy Chief Betts, are fully committed to fostering a culture of professionalism and excellence. This culture includes treating all who we come into contact with dignity and respect that they deserve. Over the last several years since this occurred, we have taken steps in providing additional education and training around dealing with vulnerable individuals, including de-escalation techniques in volatile situations. This supplements training the members receive at the Ontario Police College. As well, we have delivered training on workplace harassment and the Human Rights Code, including the obligation to report. It is my belief that these types of training sessions should not be one-time events. the values and principles of our profession and the excellence we strive for and that the community deserves should be continually reinforced through training, education, and policy. In the near future, as part of in-service training delivered to our members, we will be providing a session on workplace culture, specifically police culture, which includes how members' repeated exposure to traumatic events can influence their behavior, including their treatment of others. Now, to be clear, I am not implying or making excuses for what happened in 2016. However, this training is relevant in a workplace where members are exposed to trauma and occupational stress, more so than any other occupation. This training includes early identification of problem behavior and appropriate intervention, including the duty to report. This training has been planned for some time and is part of our larger effort to take care of one another so that we can take better care of the community. Amendments to the Police Services Act, which are not yet in force, include statutory obligations for members of police services to report misconduct of fellow members when it comes to their attention. Despite this legislation not being in force and with no firm timeline in sight, we are in the midst of developing our own process, which will require members to report misconduct. We hope to have this in place in the near future. This procedure will be reinforced through appropriate training and education and will provide protection for anybody coming forward to report misconduct. The London Police Services Board is the governing body that oversees the police service. On a quarterly basis, the administration provides a report to the board on police complaints and discipline, and you received one today. This report has been routinely available to the public for many years. Having reviewed the current format and content of this quarterly report, I believe we could provide a more comprehensive report with further information. Our desire and aim is to provide a more comprehensive report. However, we must ensure that we are balancing opportunities for increased transparency with our statutory obligations around privacy and confidentiality. A review of these issues is currently underway to determine how we can best satisfy our objective, and I am confident we can improve the process. Finally, the police complaint and disciplinary process can seem confusing and convoluted at times, particularly for the public who may not be well-versed in policing law, labor law, collective agreements, and the discipline and complaint framework that we and our board are governed by. For that reason, we will be providing a public presentation at a board meeting before the end of the year to provide an overview of our complaint and discipline process that will provide further transparency and understanding of how your police service operates in those respects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, the board will continue to work with administration. We'll continue to all have the conversations. And I'm confident that we'll always do better and there's more work to be done. So before I call the meeting, so I'll turn over to the Vice Chair.
Apologies, Chair. I just wanted to thank the Chief and the Chiefs generally for taking this matter really seriously. I think it's obviously an important one for the community, and I just wanted to reiterate what the Chair has said, that we're also going to be committed to reviewing our own policies and clarifying our role with legal counsel and working with administration so that we can all do better. And thank you.
So thank you, Vice Chair. Seeing no further discussion, I will look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Moved by Jeff, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? And carries. And now I'll turn over to the public for the open mic opportunity. For members of the public are welcome to speak to the board, specifically as in our capacity as board governance. So I'll just look over and see if there's any speakers today. Sure, come on up. And I guess before I forget, I wanted to shout out USC for coming here today. And I see, congratulations to your recent USC elections.
Thank you. So I'd like to read out a statement that the USC provided to some of our media outlets that have asked about the memorandum of understanding about the information sharing agreement between London Police and Western University. So the USC has been an active member of the citywide Brofdale Task Force since January 2019 because we recognize the serious safety concerns that exist on Brofdale Avenue during annual end of September festivities. The recently disclosed information sharing agreement with police was not an initiative of the task force, but rather a direct agreement between Western University and the London Police Service. The USC does not endorse this agreement, nor were we involved in the ideation or creation of this agreement. Since learning about the agreement in June, we have shared our concerns about its overly broad scope and potentially wide application. The MOU does not define a specific threshold of seriousness that would trigger information sharing unless other than the criminal charges, the CDSA, and any provincial and federal acts, as it is written in the MOU. It does not restrict information sharing specifically to unsanctioned street parties like Brofdale, just large non-university sanctioned gatherings. These are things that should be clarified and made less vague. Both Western's administration and London Police Service have informed us that the spirit of the agreement is to only go after the most serious offenses and that student safety is the primary concern and the community safety is the primary concern. However, while we trust the people around the table, we trust the Deputy Chief, the Chief of Police, the members of Western administration, the literature and the language in the MOU is simply not clear enough. We believe that our students expect a reasonable degree of separation between their on and off campus activities, which is why we are concerned by the broad scope of this agreement. We were also disappointed, as Vice Chair Susan Toth mentioned, about the lack of consultation with the public about this, especially our students. But simply, we cannot support this agreement because we are uncertain of its potential implications in the future on our students, and we are concerned by its overly broad scope, and we believe that our students were not inadequately consulted on its development. Our primary contribution to this task force is Purple Fest, which I'm proud to say has sold out, and we're hoping to welcome everyone on Saturday to our event. So that's the statement that we provided, and yesterday we had a council meeting of the University Students' Council where we had over 46 counselors and our executive and our associates there, and we presented our reports, and in the question period, we received over 40 minutes of questions from our counselors with concerns about this MOU and about the reasons that they don't know what is going on, and this is something I'd like to bring to the attention of the police board as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and just looking for any other members of the public. Not seeing any. Thank you very much to the members of the public, and I know I made a commitment to meet with USC and after this public meeting, so I'll see you guys shortly, and I'll meet you up on the 3rd floor. Thank you very much, guys. And members of the board members, I just want to remind you that we'll be meeting and reconvening in about 10 minutes in committee room.